No idea.
Welcome to the meeting of the Planning Board. Everyone, welcome to the meeting of the Planning Board for November 26th, 2019. And today's meeting obviously is a public meeting associated with the Downtown Corridor Zoning District change. And we have Ted Brovich here for our representation to talk further about the plan. And we're going to open up to the public and also to the board for comments and questions. And Ted will be access for us here. And anybody who hasn't already, please come up to our sign-in sheet. Give any information that you can in terms of phone or email so we can contact you if you have any questions. And planning staff will contact you, or if you have any questions, you can contact them and they have a way of getting back to you. Thank you very much. Mr. Rovitz.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to, again, cover what you may have been here for the last time to hear, and that is the Downtown Corridor Zoning Initiative. This is a follow-up on the 2017 Maple Street Industrial 1 Area Zoning District change. Can you hear me? Sorry. Okay. So, about a year and a half ago, we adopted zoning for this area called the Maple Street Traditional Neighborhood Development Area, and that's basically an overlay district that allows for mixed use with some specific design standards to allow new residential and mixed use, where today, essentially, it's an industrially zoned district that is really underutilized, and now that hot water is gone, it's an opportunity to do some big changes to that district. But in a sense that something that's within scale that the community wants, but also a walkable, attractive district that complements the downtown area and supports the businesses downtown. That was the primary goal. So once we got that package of zoning in place, we decided to continue down the Maple Street corridor and look at the current zoning, which is a combination of commercial industrial 1, a commercial 1 along the core downtown area, a combination of residential 1 and commercial 1A in the neighborhood, that's centered on Cherry and Putnam, and then further down High Street, another industrial 1 zone that is essentially strip development that is largely underutilized. So what we're proposing as part of this package is a new downtown neighborhood district, which we call the live-work district because it's a combination, as it is today, of small-scale commercial offices as well as residential, from 1 families to 4 or 5 families in this area. And then the downtown core area, which is again centered on Maple and Elm Street, and that's where we're showing a new opportunity for some mixed use in terms of residential, people living above the shops, but also standalone buildings on the side streets that could be residential or commercial. And then the same mixed use opportunities down here along High Street, basically from the fire station down to the interchange. So that is generally the scope of our work. Again, we're taking that package that we adopted in 2017 for the Maple Street area, and we're basically bringing it down and sort of calibrating it for what we want to see in the downtown core, what we want to see in the neighborhoods, and then what we want to see on High Street. And they're very different districts, obviously. The downtown is our downtown. It's our village center. So we want to make sure that it's an attractive, walkable district. We don't want it to be overwhelmed with residential development. So we're specific about where it goes and how it fits in. Whereas, further down High Street, that's really an open opportunity for higher density mixed use. So these are called character-based zoning districts. So what that means is we're taking a step backwards and trying to understand what it is that the community would like to see in these different parts of the corridor. So we had a lengthy process with the Maple Street area where we did a series of exercises. In this case, we were taking styrofoam blocks and we were putting new buildings in and around existing ones and taking some out that were dilapidated and replacing them. And also creating some open spaces and some new streetscape improvements. That went further down High Street all the way to the interchange. So we had some good feedback in that first series of workshops on the corridor. We also did what we call a visual preference survey. So we asked folks to rate these different images and to tell us whether you felt it fit in to the corridor, whether it was appropriate for the Maple Street area, for the core of downtown, or for High Street. And basically, a series of images here are sort of examples of the type and scale of building designs that people sort of favored. So again, sort of moderate scale, mixed use, nice storefronts, nice signage, nice facade treatments, and traditional architecture. So that's what we've been trying to sort of translate into the zoning standards, and that's what we did for Maple Street. And again, we're extending that down the corridor as part of this exercise. So when we say context-based zoning, again, it's taking a step backwards, sort of getting a vision, and then going forward into putting together zoning standards. So in this case, you've got design standards for buildings and building frontages as they face the sidewalks. You've got screening and landscaping and parking design standards. But you also have that in combination with pedestrian-oriented streetscape improvements, improvements to the sidewalks, and then how things that are in the commercial parts of these buildings sort of overlap onto the sidewalk and make it an attractive, vibrant commercial district. So there's things like opportunities for little seating areas, outdoor dining, good signage, awnings, public art, and those sorts of things that are built into the design standards. So we want it not to be just about new development, but how those developments fit in the context of downtown and how we can collectively build a vibrant downtown district through public enhancements as well. So we took the step backwards with the downtown area. We came up with a series of conceptual ideas and some sort of visual preferences that people had. Everything from wayfinding signage programs to infill development and streetscape treatments and that sort of thing. And that was sort of formulated into an overall concept plan that showed, in this case, where you might see, additional buildings, additional stories added to one-story buildings on Maple Street, or where you might see some selective redevelopment, and even things like parking, over time, that those, parking facilities that we own, the public parking spaces and lots, could be consolidated and reconfigured so you can get more out of them, or maybe even at some point, some structured parking to sort of create a foundation for further investments on a block-by-block basis. So this is a core area, along Maple Street and, down here at Danvers Square at Elm Street. Again, we're sort of focused on sort of a moderate scale mix of uses, but we want to preserve the commercial activity. So for example, in this particular area, we have what we call a frontage zone, pedestrian frontage zone, which means that at ground level, those spaces have to be in commercial use. They have to be oriented towards business, oriented towards people that are walking, where upstairs you can have a mix of commercial or residential, and then further behind and on side streets you can have more residential. So it's really important that we maintain that cluster of retail and restaurant activity in that core area of downtown. In the neighborhoods, it's basically allowing for the general mix that's there today, which is more of a horizontal mix where you've got some office spaces, lawyer's office, CPAs, some salons and that sort of thing, which are certainly part of the proposed package, but larger things like industrial spaces, such as this, those self-storage and other things that are allowed there today would be curved back so that it would be sort of it's bolstering the neighborhood as it is and allowing it to grow sort of naturally without the threat of large-scale commercial industrial developments. So this is a conceptual plan that was done about 1.5 years ago for the High Street area, again showing sort of a creation of sort of blocks where you have different connections, internal connections between properties rather than curb cut after curb cut after curb cut, and infill along the street so that the buildings can come up and create some enclosure, again, in order to create more of a walkable mixed-use district that's attractive not only for commercial businesses, but also for mixed use and for some residential. And that the hope is that at some point there'll be a spur trail on the back side of this that can create sort of a nice attribute if people are living there in the future. But again, it's sort of breaking it up and creating sort of an internal network so you don't have to put everybody out onto High Street, and then creating sort of blocks where there can be reinvestment in given properties. And that's the proposed district right there. So the building standards, again, are similar to what were adopted for Maple Street. They're just extended down and calibrated for these individual areas along the corridor. But again, you can see the zoning map, which has those what I call civic spaces and pedestrian zones. The civic spaces are dedicated open spaces, whether they're public or private, that developers they can choose to invest in as part of a trade-off for on-site open space. We have building design standards. We have densities at the same density that we have for Maple Street, which essentially is 20 units per 20 units per acre as a minimum for multifamily houses. Smaller townhouses would be less, be 12 units per acre. And we have the same package of flexible design, parking standards, new sign standards, and design standards for open space. So open space can be anything from an outdoor terrace in front of your building. It could be a rooftop terrace. It could be community gardens. It could be pocket parks. So we're providing a variety of different types of open space, but we have design standards that go with them to make sure that they're properly done and that they're active spaces. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to the planning board.
Okay. Thank you, Ted.
Probably have to turn around. Sorry
yes, everybody gets to play musical chairs for a moment. Ted, if you wouldn't mind, we're going to use that podium.
What's that?
So we're going to be using that podium for questions from the audience. If you wouldn't mind taking a seat over here. If you want to bring your laptop, that'd be great. So everybody's going to get a chance to talk or ask questions if they have any. A little bit different protocol on this one. We're going to bring it out to the board first, and then we're going to throw it out to the audience. Just a little reminder for everybody in the future, just our dates that are coming up. On the 3rd, if everything goes as planned, the selectmen will be making a decision to return the article back to the planning board. There'll be a community outreach on December 7th. On the 10th, we're having another public hearing. It'll be a full public hearing, and everybody have their opportunity to talk. So even if you don't decide to ask questions and just want to take in information today, you can come to one of our future meetings and you'll have your opportunity to ask questions. These are warrant articles that we're going to present to the Board of Selectmen, then to FinCom, and then ultimately to town meeting as long as everything goes through. So there'll be plenty of chances between the FinCom meetings and the Board of Selectmen meetings, which will be, eventually will be on January 7th for the warrant article, and on the 14th for the FinCom, as long as everything goes as planned. But for right now, I'm going to open it up to the board because we want to give them a chance to discuss any questions for Ted or any changes or any comments about it. I'm going to throw Peg under the bus first.
Of course you are.
Because she wasn't here last time. If you'd like, I can ask someone else first.
No.
Go right ahead, Peg.
I wasn't here the last time, but I was here for the,
I know you're well versed in this.
I'm not sure if I'm well-versed. I'm looking for clarification from Mr. Bravitz. So, we're talking about a complete zoning change in the C1 district, right? You're going to change that to, okay. And for the High Street, are we talking about another complete zoning change or an overlay? Okay. A complete, okay, and that's fine with me. The 40R that we've talked about, that will be the overlay?
We're gonna discuss that in a moment.
Okay.
I'm gonna let the board ask its questions, but Aaron Henry has some comments about that. in a minute.
Okay. Other than that, as you all know, everybody here knows, I was very, very comfortable with the standards that we put together for Maple Street, the Maple Street overlay down by Maple and Hobart. And I feel it's a great change. I'd like to see a little development going there yet, but it hasn't. So I'm very comfortable with the changes that we have here. I think that our design requirements are fantastic. We're not going to create tunneling in the downtown with the way we have the angle of the heights. There is plenty of parking. I think that, you know, with working with the developer and the landowners, we can resolve those issues. So I'm very, very comfortable with what you've presented so far, Ted. And I know traffic will be an issue, and that's something we will all be discussing too. So as far as I'm concerned, I think we're ready to move ahead. I've seen the timeline, and I think that's great.
Jim?
No, I would agree with Peg. I mean, we've been studying this for, it feels like 2 years, but
It's been 2 years.
pretty close. So we've seen this presentation. I've probably seen it over a dozen times, at least, I think. So, yeah. So, I would echo Peg's sentiments. That I think you've done an exhaustive job as far as the outreach with the town. Again, we're getting a little bit more people coming to the meetings now, but we've started this almost 2 years ago. So if there are questions, we can drill down and find out what other issues might be out there. But I think it's a good plan.
Nathaniel?
Well, I take a different point of view, and I came to the board about a year ago, and this had already been underway apparently for over a year.
About that, yeah.
Yeah, so when I joined the board, it was full steam ahead, and really I had no opportunity to give an opinion, which I usually don't have that opportunity. Well, I have the opportunity to give an opinion. I don't get to vote on a lot of things very specific as the associate. But I have had the opportunity to see a member of the select board come in and voice her interest in benefiting from the changes that are proposed. I've also heard one of the members of the planning board also opine that that person would also like to benefit from these changes. But what I haven't heard is that there's going to be a benefit to the entire town as a whole. I keep hearing things that sound really nice, and Ted does a very nice presentation, and you know, in honesty, Aaron Henry and David Fields have poured themselves into this project, and I totally have absolutely no concern as to their genuine interest and belief that this is the best for Danvers. But I just take a different point of view. I see it as going to be a traffic nightmare. That's Route 35 that runs through downtown Danvers. Where are the cars going to go? I mean, it's a truck route. People are coming from the highways and other towns that are heading towards another highway, or 128 in particular, or vice versa, or going to like Salem. You know, you run into the fact that the Danvers River is an entire obstacle for roadways, and it isn't downtown Newburyport. It isn't State Street or Newburyport, where the thruway is actually Route 1A or Route 1. And State Street's beautiful, and you can go there and park and have your al fresco dining and go shopping, and everything's like, you know, as they like to say, unicorns and rainbows. This is downtown Danvers, and it's a different animal altogether. So right now, since they've done the reconfiguration of some of the downtown in the last, I don't know, 10, 20 years, with the crosswalks and the timed pedestrian signals, I can't stand going through downtown Danvers sometimes. I sit there and watch the traffic back up, and I'm like, I can't believe this traffic signal is allowing 20 seconds for somebody to cross the road. It only took them 3, and now I'm sitting here and there's nobody in the road. Where'd the person go? In some of the other meetings that we've heard, I've heard benefits to the town in terms of income tax gaining, which is always attractive if it's attractive to property owners as a kind of a carrot. And it's being sold that, well, we need to get the income tax increases because, well, there are budgets and people are entitled to raises, and especially those that work under union contracts for, you know, fire departments and police departments and educators and DPW workers and so forth. So there's always an incentive to increase the tax base. And that was one of the things that I heard at a previous meeting, which was why this should go forward, because, of course, when you take unused space and you turn it into residential space, the ability to tax that square footage is going to increase exponentially. So I look at that and I think, Well, that certainly benefits a lot of people, but not the majority of Danvers. It benefits those that are earning their income from the tax base of the town. So individuals that work in this government have come and opined that they'd like to benefit from it. And then, of course, people who work in the town are going to benefit from it. But what about the rest of us? I understand that it sounds like an attractive idea to have green space and outdoor seating restaurants and so forth. But again, this isn't State Street in Newburyport. This is a throughway, and it's going to create a traffic nightmare. There was talk at a previous meeting about working on a proposal at some point of building a parking garage in downtown Danvers to accommodate the parking shortage. I mean, a parking garage in downtown Danvers? I'm sorry, I didn't think that I'd live to see that, and I really don't want to. Don't think that that meets the character of the community that I grew up here observing, and I don't really want to see that. What else? The character of downtown Danvers, as you drive through downtown Danvers and you see the skyline, that's going to drastically change. And it won't change overnight, but at some point, 20, 30 years down the road, you'll be driving through downtown Danvers and say, this is totally different than what I grew up looking at. And maybe it looks nice to a first-time arriver, but I don't want to see that. I like the way downtown Danvers looks. Other things that were brought up, the idea that having certain green space in downtown Danvers at certain spots is, how a town square should look. Well, that's a matter of opinion. And I don't know that there is a particular one way that a downtown should look or green space. So there are a lot of things that have been thrown out there to benefit the few. Another one I would point out are, of course, anyone who's interested in capitalizing on the building projects that would occur, so developers and realtors and so forth. Of course, they stand to bank a pretty good penny at some point, because you buy a piece of property with so much square footage that you can build, and you can increase that once the zoning is changed. And now you've taken essentially something that's worth, for example, using round numbers, 100,000, and you convert it into multiple units, and now it's worth $1 million, right? So there's a lot of profit to be gained there by developers. But again, does that mean that it's beneficial to the people of Danvers, everybody that lives in downtown? One of the other things that were talked about were making the properties a certain size to keep the price down. Well, and there was actually one thing that was thrown out at the last time we had one of these meetings was price controls. Now, I don't know how you price control something that's on the free market. Maybe there are ways to do it, but does that mean that the town has to set certain covenants on the property? Is that even feasible? What happens when after the first people that buy at a certain rate, and all of a sudden Danvers is extremely attractive, and it's attracting people from communities that aren't even, the people that don't have any connection to downtown Danvers, but everybody's flocking here, and they want to pay top dollar for it, and next thing you know, what everyone thought was going to be affordable is now $750 million. I don't know. I mean, you can't control the free market if it's going to remain a free market. So the idea that price controls would be instituted is a concern. There was also mentioned that 20% of any of the available residential units, I believe that was the number that was proposed, would be for low-income housing. Well, I'm just going to say it. With low-income housing comes other issues. I'm one who worked in law enforcement for 10 years, and yeah, you get crime, you get increase in crime and other community problems with low income. Not to say that people that don't have people who come from low income should not have something available to them, but I don't want it in downtown Danvers. So I don't know that I covered everything because I didn't have any notes. I was just going off the top of my head from being in this for a year, and I just feel like it's being steamrolled into the town as if the whole planning board is of unanimous opinion about this. And since I've just been given the opportunity to share my opinion with you, I'm against it. You know, I think that the town can raise its income in other ways, and I think that they could look to other parts of the town to develop, and if there's a shortage of housing, don't do it in downtown Danvers, do it somewhere else, because it's going to be a nightmare. Thank you.
I'm going to move on to Charles. Please, Charles?
So, I don't know if I have to direct it.
You don't, it's your moment to talk and ask any questions. We're going to open up to the rest of the board before we move forward to the audience.
Okay,
So we can talk about and discuss different things that have been said.
okay.
Go right ahead.
So Nat, my question for you actually is when you're driving through downtown, are you essentially going from 62 to 128 or vice versa?
I live in Danvers, I drive all over town,
Okay.
at
So
any given time.
how often are you, like visiting the businesses downtown?
I've lived here for 47 years, so whatever somebody visits in 47 years. So, and
Okay.
hopefully I'll live another 47. I just got my hair cut in Zolo's today, so just,
Yeah.
And I got coffee next door at Kathmandu. So, that was just today. I parked on Elm Street.
Okay. So I guess my question is, if you can't stand to drive through the downtown, why do you?
I happened to pick a time of day. I happened to pick a time of day when it was not busy, and I don't typically drive downtown at certain hours. It was early in the morning. And
Charles, if you could just speak a little louder, I apologize. Some of the
No,
audience
yeah.
members can't hear.
But I'm not saying that I don't want to patronize downtown Danvers. I do, but I don't want downtown Danvers turning into something that it isn't now.
No, yeah, no, I understand. And that I'm not trying to be combative. My perspective then, as a young person who's going to be inheriting the town and sees the issues with all of the traffic backup and the fact that, like you mentioned, we have 20 seconds to cross the street. And the lack of affordable housing, the fact that rents are through the roof, all of it. I haven't really been quiet. I haven't been discreet about my viewpoint that the downtown should belong to pedestrians. We're never going to have a good civic space if, motorists think that they own that area. It just shouldn't be. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be driving through it, because obviously we need to patronize the businesses. There are people with mobility issues. I understand that, but I am less concerned about traffic, I have to say.
I'm
Bow
sorry,
Street.
this is for the board only. Right now, you'll have your opportunity to ask questions.
Yeah. Far away. I just want to clear one thing up, and you can stop me if you think it would be more appropriate for you to, but we are not discussing low-income housing. We are discussing affordable housing. There is a difference. I don't want anyone in this room, anybody watching on TV, anybody posting on Facebook, to go home and tell their friends, their family, anyone, that it's low-income housing going in downtown. It's not. It's affordable. I know that it's also super easy to get confused between the two, because where does the distinction lie, rhetorically?
Right.
The word euphemism comes to mind.
Yeah. Well, no comment. I do have a question, though, that the other day somebody got to me and was asking me about the affordable housing, and I say we really need affordable housing desperately, because housing is not affordable. But they were asking me how we intend to prevent, if we're keeping these sections of downtown affordable, from, these being entry-level condos at $150,000, and then the next level up is $400,000 or $500,000. And I don't know if that's for, the Affordable Housing Committee to comment on. I don't know if it's our department.
Well, I'm going to
but-
try and answer that for you, but I may end up turning it over to Aaron on this one. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. We currently have on the books for any number of houses or units that are going into town above 4? Is it 4 or 5? Five. For an affordable unit to be either paid for or put into the scope. So 20% is the number that's already there. And it's based off of the mean amount of money that the town average makes across the board. That's where the dollar amount comes in, and the percentage of 20% is already on the books, and this is simply going to fall under that category.
Right.
So low-income housing is something that the state is dealing with. They give every town and city its opportunity by doing affordable housing so that the town and the cities can have control over what goes in for either low or affordable housing into its city and towns. It's across the board for everybody, not just Danvers. And we've adopted the habit of affordable housing for that very reason. And it's been on the books for 5 years, maybe more.
We changed it. Yeah.
About 5 years, yeah. It's been on the books for about 5 years, and I know we have 1 or 2 people from the Affordable Housing Trust and group out in the audience today. I hope
So,
that answered your question.
Sorry, no, I think I might have, I was unclear on that.
Okay.
So what he was
Did I do
asking
it?
me
Did you want to add anything to
I
that,
can
Aaron?
I'll add one thing, but let Charles.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
was
start another.
if there's a condo downtown in this new development and it's affordable, and let's say either an 85-year-old retiree or a 30-year-old, you know, at this point starting out
Right.
kind of person buys it, right? And it's affordable. But then, yeah, you know, like a couple miles down the road, the next most affordable option in terms of like a single family home is twice or more the cost. Like how do we prevent that from happening?
If I'm following
Go ahead, Aaron.
correctly, so in theory, an affordable unit, capital A affordable, whether you're at the highest income bands that you can restrict a unit at, or even lower, like a housing authority unit or something, that's much deeper level of affordability. The state requires us to deed restrict those units in perpetuity and income qualify those households. So once we go through that process, those units are forever locked in effect, forever locked in to a certain price range that will float over time based on the area-wide median income of the household. So, and typically, that's 80% of the area income. I think the situation you're talking about is, and what we're seeing in other parts of Metro Boston is a polarization of the housing stock, where you have communities that have met their affordable housing standards, so they have some housing stock available, you know, and again, a 2-bedroom affordable unit, I will say, is approximately $180,000 is what that sales price comes out to be. Again, that can vary depending on the particulars, but you're talking around that, you know, $200,000 a unit mark. And then you have market, right? The next band up is just whatever the market will bear, and you're seeing towns going north of $1 million for a median sales price. And there's nothing happening in between. There are communities looking at instituting some sort of price control in there. We have talked about whether or not Danvers is an appropriate community for that sort of thing. Typically what you're seeing is somewhere between 120 area median income to 150% area income. Right now, that's where we're at as our market. So we're not recommending at the staff level anyway, we're not recommending we go and introduce those price controls, because that's where the free market is right now. But something as we go forward over time, that is, again, it's something we'll monitor through our housing work. What we term the affordability gap, we try to mine the gap, to pardon the pun. I don't think we're there yet, but certainly if sales prices of homes in Danvers continue to escalate at the rate they've been escalating over the last 2 decades, at some point, it may become something that the town, through town meeting, decides to introduce. I don't think we're there yet, but to your point, that is something and a phenomenon that you're seeing in Metro West and in the South Shore a little bit, where you're starting to see this kind of real divergent from what people think is affordable, lowercase a, from what affordable actually is. So I don't think we're ready for an intervention there, but it's certainly something to be mindful of going forward. Not sure if that answered your question, but
Yeah, no, that's, and again, you know, I only asked a surface level for his input
yeah.
on it, and yeah.
I mean, typically, I
was
think
just-
community members will be like, gee, it
I
seems
didn't know how
like
to-
you should be able to buy a house in Danvers for $400,000. You know, maybe, maybe not, but, I mean, in the end, but introducing a price control at that level is complicated, and I know members of the Housing Trust know how complicated it is to simply do 80% or less. When you go above that threshold, it gets pretty complicated, so it's something we need to watch going forward, and our office is tracking that sort of statistic.
Cool.
Anything further?
No, I guess I'll clarify that my comment about traffic and how I'm not as concerned with it increasing. One is that I feel like we're already at the saturation point traffic-wise. And two, because of the fact that as we redesign the downtown and it becomes a more livable and walkable area, just seeing the trends that people aged 25 to 35 are following, I see a lot more use of public transportation, the rail trails, that kind of stuff. I don't see it really inducing demand, for the record.
Okay. John?
So I've been on the board for a while, and I, participated in some of the goals and objectives, and I think the town's got it right in terms of where the downtown needs to go as it transitions for the future. Clearly, retail is changing dramatically, and if the town wants a retail base in the downtown, we've seen this, and I've seen this professionally in other communities, you need residents in the downtown to drive some commercial traffic. So I think there's been a lot of hard work over the last, several years to get us to this point. Like Peg said initially, it would be nice to see some of the new zoning that took place in Maple Street start, so the community can see the benefit of what's gonna happen. I think, obviously, when the ideal baby shoe location gets, completed, leased up, it will be, a good location to look at how successful this concept can be. I think it's important for the community to know this is gonna take a long time to get built out. This isn't gonna happen overnight, and if this is a mechanism to allow private development to take place in the downtown, I think personally that's a positive thing. I don't remember when the last major project has been done in the downtown. Peg, Jim, you guys have any ideas? Probably when
Small ones, 50 Washington.
the fire that took place back in the, in the 80s. So I think this is, I think that the community's on, obviously, traffic is a concern. Personally, I think the traffic that Danvers is facing is the successful build-out of the Cumming Center in Beverly. I mean, that's caused, a lot of traffic. There's a big property. So I don't think any of this is going to relieve it, but if this is an opportunity for people who want to live in the downtown area or in a city environment, and I've definitely professionally seen that as a trend in many communities. You just have to look to see what Beverly's gone through in the last few years. Salem, Reading, and even downtown Boston obviously is turning into more and more people want to live in a downtown community. So I'm very supportive of this proposal.
Before I throw it out to the rest of the board, I do have one basic comment associated with this. I would like the board to discuss at some point in time before we move forward of an overlay versus a zoning change. I think it's important I personally prefer an overlay, which when that discussion comes up, we can talk a little bit more about it. I don't have a major issue with a zoning law change as opposed to overlay. I think it benefits both the community and also I think it benefits the current owners of the buildings if we do an overlay versus a zoning change. But we can discuss that at later in this particular meeting because some of what we're going to talk about may influence one way or the other how we feel about that. At this point in time, I do want to mention that I'm obviously in favor of this. I feel that the downtown, although it is, I've always loved the downtown area, and I think anytime that we can create smart growth in this town, because growth is going to happen whether we see it or not. Whether we want it or not, it's going to happen. And if we don't change what's available to us downtown, it may change out of control. There are currently on the books availability that allows for heights that are even higher than what we're suggesting. And there are possibilities of density that's even higher than what we're suggesting. I'm not trying to scare anybody into saying that's why we need to make these changes, but as a board, as a planning board member, also extending out to the Board of Selectmen and to the Zoning Board of Appeals. We're the boards that have seen these things change. We've seen higher density come across us all over town because there is no more space to build single-family homes in this town. It's limited. There is space, but there's not a lot. We all know that. So if we don't control how the density occurs, and this is one avenue of doing that, but if we don't control how the density occurs through smart growth, then it's going to grow around us and it's going to be abundant, worse than we know. That's my only comment associated with it. So I am fully in favor of this. The traffic side of it is something I've always been concerned with across the entire town, not just in one area or another. And I've always felt strongly that whenever we do a site in front of us, that if we can control how the traffic goes in and out of that site, access and egress, and how the parking is done, then we can control how the street traffic works. And that's what's going to allow us to do that, by controlling the traffic off the streets and how it gets on and off the streets. And that's the best way to do that as far as I'm concerned. Aaron, you had a question?
Just wanted to highlight a point on traffic as well. I think at the staff level, and for those who know me, I was once on the planning board. Now I'm on staff, and as a staff, we've had to dive in. I've had the opportunity to dive into the town's work on traffic, and I think there is a traffic problem. I live downtown, and it's worse today than it was 10 years ago, 12 years ago when I moved to town. And now that I'm on staff, I've kind of been prodding from the inside, well, what's going on? How are we going to address this, or what's the plan? And to be fair to the town, there is no plan. There's the backups we call one. Basically, how this works is every couple of months we call Mass Highway and tell them that the lights at 35 and 128 and 62 and 128 are awful, and we would like them to fix them. That's our plan. I'm chair of the Traffic Commission. That's what we do. This proposal, as the incremental improvements go forward, we are writing into the zoning a mechanism to, rather than have the traditional development pattern of, oh, I want to build a building, I have to do a traffic study, and then I will tell you how that traffic study can mitigate my problems. And we're going to kind of build into this a mechanism whereby the planning board can direct where those improvements go to ensure that those improvements are community driven as opposed to development driven. So we're trying to turn that on its head a little bit, or at least break the kind of conventional model. At least in that sense, we'll know from the outset, what do we want to see High Street become or Maple Street become. Maybe we don't want that, even though the traffic study said for this development, the best thing to do is course of action A, but the community would rather see mid-block crossing on High Street and increase the pedestrian access of it. And if it's not the best for the development, that's okay, because it's better for the community. So we are cognizant of it, but I think as staff, I'd be doing the community a disservice if I said we have some master plan. We don't. The traffic is here today. It's not going away. From what we can tell, it is what it is. And for better or for worse, I think this proposal tries to attack that in a reasonable way. So as these incremental developments go forward, we're also incrementally trying to improve the streetscape in the corridor to make it a better, a better place. So again, that's not a panacea, and it's not going to solve all problems, and it's certainly not going to satisfy everybody. But we are trying to be very cognizant of it and hope that we use this development such that it will, what we get, to springboard into improvements that come from the community as opposed to development.
So before I throw it out to the audience, does the board have anything else to discuss? Questions, either for staff or to discuss for the board? I saw,
Did they call on you?
Mr. Chairman, I thought Mr. Henry was going to talk about zoning.
we are planning on talking about the 40-hour applicant, and, but we were going to do that. Is it, do you feel it's?
We can do it, we can do
Okay,
it
we
now.
can just,
I think we should wait. You're gonna confuse them.
okay. It has no bearing on moving
It's a separate
forward. This
subject.
is just an application we put in through the state. And it may affect some of the changes that the board decides to talk about in terms of moving it forward. But it won't have any bearing in terms of us changing the zoning laws that we have in front of us at this point in time, so. I'm gonna hold that for right now. Does anyone have any questions before I put it out to the audience?
I don't have any questions. I'm trying to decide whether I want to respond or not, because I am one of the members of the board it was just suggested I have a beneficial interest. I don't have a beneficial interest in anything. I have an interest for my age group. I have an interest in seeing affordable housing within the downtown, because people in my age group would like to be able to walk around downtown. There are many couples and single people sitting in large single-family homes that could get a very good price for their house, but after they sell it, they're not going to have a lot of money to continue to live on. There's very little affordable housing for someone looking to downsize, people over 65. I certainly hope that people in the younger age group are saving to their 401ks so that they're not living on Social Security when they get to that state. The other group that I feel will benefit totally from this will be the younger age group. The under 30s, I believe, I can never say the word right, the millennials, I never get it out right. But because they can't stay in Danvers. They can't afford to even find an apartment in Danvers. So I see the benefit of this project, the benefit to my generation, as a place where we can, one, have affordable housing, two, have access to services that we don't have to jump in our cars and run to. We can go to the coffee shop, we can go across the street to Cumberland or some other better store that was there and buy things. We can get exercise, we can go over to the rail trail and walk. Our children are gone, we don't need to be in our big houses and trying to find someone to now cut the lawn for us. So anytime you have heard me say, I wish I could live downtown, it isn't because I know a developer, it isn't because I'm going to benefit in any way personally from this. It's that I'm thinking of the age group that I'm now in and how my friends and I feel about how we want to spend the last part of our lives. And to not spend everything we have on housing, be able to do things that we want to do. So I just want to make that clear. I can't speak for the other person, but that's my feeling, and I will continue to say that this would benefit me, not me personally, but benefit my age group.
Peg, could I just rebut that, because you're referring to what I said?
Yes, I am.
And I didn't name you in
No,
particular, but since you
it's
just outed
obviously
yourself.
Hold
yes.
on, but I have no problems with the comments from the board. I don't want this to turn into a personal debate back and
Okay,
forth
okay.
between anyone on this board or also anyone in the audience.
All I
Go
would
ahead
say
and
is,
proceed.
I would invite anybody, I don't know with a date, but you can look up the minutes, you can see the date, it's documented when you made your statement. You stated that you wanted to be part of that age group that moves downtown. You said it. You didn't say you were part of an age group. You said you actually wanted to. I didn't say that you had some inside track.
All right,
but
well-
you said you did. You were interested in doing that.
Yes.
And we can pull the recording and we can see for ourselves. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but that's my memory of
Okay.
it.
I sometimes speak and double speak.
I think if I maybe
Go right ahead.
can hear, I think maybe where Peg wanted to clear things up is that it sounded like you were insinuating that they had a financial interest, that they were going to be developing or,
No, but when a member of the board
Yeah.
who has influence in speaking to the public about their advocation of a proposal to going forward says that that person wants to directly benefit from that change, it's got the appearance of a conflict of interest, and it should be pointed out.
yeah.
I don't think using the benefits of anything on the town to your own personal gain in terms of using them is a conflict of interest. Because everyone in this town does that, whether you're on a board as a volunteer or not. Using the library, all those different things. But financial gains, I agree with you. That's totally different. That's not what we're going to discuss here. I don't want to cross that. That's a boundary that this board has all gone through, ethics training, and we all know about that. That is not something that anyone on this board has ever pursued in any way, shape, or form. I'm going to leave it at that, because I think any further conversation beyond that about this might start preclude us down a pathway we shouldn't be. Okay?
Yep.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, I'm just a little shocked at the, and I agree you're welcome to your opinion, Nate, but you've been on this board for over a year. We've been talking about this for over a year. You've had plenty of time to comment. And every meeting you have an opportunity to comment. To say you have not until this meeting is kind of an affront to the board and to myself to say that. I'm really shocked at that. That's my opinion, and I am definitely shocked that you're bringing this out tonight. You're welcome to your opinions, which I'm fine with. But I think it's important that people understand the history of why we're here today. I've been on this board since 1996, okay? The town has spent a tremendous amount of money on experts like Ted, and they've had tremendous amount of open space committees. Bill Nicholson has been on probably most of these committees and studies of various areas of town, and I've studied on different areas of the industrial areas of town. We have 11 industrial 1 and industrial 1A, I guess, zones in town. And we've been very proactive in this town about looking at those zones where we had industry that's kind of gone by the wayside and reusing those areas and offering a residential use. So we've been succeeded, and we've been very proactive as a town, having these special town meetings every year, every other year, and doing planning, because we're planners. That's what we do. We're a planning board. We don't have a lot of sites coming in. We don't have a lot of development coming in because there isn't a lot of land to develop or to reuse. So we're, in addition to just saying, oh, we're not going to have a meeting this week because we have nothing to talk about, we're doing smart growth. We're doing planning for the town, and that's what this is. So we did primarily most of the industrial zones, as you know, throughout the town, and then in our joint meetings with both the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Selectmen and the town manager, the new town manager, it was impressed upon us that, hey, you guys just did a great job with the industrial zone down at the old fire station. While we're at it, I know you're looking at the next piece of industrial zone, which is the High Street piece. While you're at it, let's concentrate also on the commercial zones in downtown. So that was motivated in part by what we had done to the I-zone districts, but the town manager and the selectmen encouraged us, proceeded to get additional funding for state grants, to have experts like Ted and his associate to come, and we've gone through 24 meetings. So plenty of time to opine and get your word out if you wanted to, and for townspeople to do that. But the reason is we're adding another use for these areas that don't allow for residential use. That's we're allowing for that opportunity. Where if I'm an owner of an industrial building and I'm not going to get a assembly company to come in to assemble widgets anymore because they're not going to come downtown. There's no parking. There's no place for them to put their people. I'm going to go to Electronics Ave or I'm going to go to an industrial area. So this gives that landowner another opportunity if they choose to take that. Doesn't mean it's going to be done overnight, and we've done it downtown already in other spots. It's done gradually. But as is mentioned, it's a smart growth, smart planning, allowing for that. So I think, I don't want to get into confronting other members, and I think that's not appropriate. I think that's, as I said, I've been on this board since '96. I've never seen that happen, so I was kind of shocked at that, and I don't want to perpetuate that because I think that's getting off topic. The topic is, we looked at this, let's have our opinions on whether we like it or not, and then see what the folks in the audience think.
All right, well, let me respond to what you said. First of all, we haven't talked about this subject every time we've been here for meetings. And when it does come up, when I first was on the board, I didn't know anything about the board. I still don't really know anything about the board. I haven't been here since 1996, but I've been in Danvers my entire life. So I bring to the table just a common person's perspective on all this. And I asked questions right from the get-go. I didn't opine anything because I've been sitting back for a year going, when are we going to be asked our opinion on it? And instead, all I've been seeing is being pushed onto the town as if we all have this unanimous viewpoint that this is the way we should go. And today, with members of the audience sitting here, I finally had the opportunity to state my opinion. And that's the answer to your question.
It's not being pushed onto the town, as I said. It's being presented to the town. The town meeting has the final say on it.
Well,
And
from
we've
my
had-
perspective,
we've brought
it's being
these things
pushed
in
on.
front of town before, and some have failed, and some have been back retooled and been passed, like the adult zone. Like, one area of the industrial rezoning did not pass. So the town is the final say. But what I'm telling you is the town has expended a tremendous amount of effort, time, and money to try to plan for the future, to plan for reuse, and that's what we're talking about.
I agree. You've spent a lot of time and effort, and Ted does a great job presenting. And I just feel like over 1 year's time period, it seems to me like it's just being shoved down the throat of the people of Danvers. And that's the impression I've got after 1 year. So that's it.
Before this goes any farther, first of all, I want to say that I welcome all opinions. I think whether I agree with it or not, I think that that's what this board is made of. This board has a history since I've been on it of not necessarily agreeing on everything, and I'm okay with that. So I welcome that opinion either way. It doesn't have to agree with it, but the board will rule on what it wants to go with forward from that. But before we do that, we still have quite a few meetings, and we'll all have opportunities to ask more questions, maybe specifics about what we have in front of us for what we either agree or don't agree with. Maybe something that will, maybe we can make some changes that Nathaniel will be a little bit more agreeable to, but we can see about that afterwards. I'm going to open it up to the audience right now. What I ask is that you raise your hands. I'll call on you. We ask that you use the podium and just give us your name before you make your statement, question, or comment. Anyone in the audience have any questions or comments they would like to ask? Mr. Nicholson.
Can you turn that light on over there, please?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bill Nicholson, Precinct 8, Town Meeting Member. The Planning Board was given a challenge, or a charge, I should say, to do something about the zoning downtown. You did a very good job on the first part, and now you're on the second part. Mr. James Sears knows that I am not a big believer of overlays. So if you're going to do anything, I hope you change the zoning. I admire the planning board, having been a planning board member, having been on the zoning board for 17 years. The town certainly has changed since I've been on a number of those boards. I appreciate all your work you do. I can understand how many hours you put in. Town hall almost becomes your second home. I support what you're doing. I think you're going to have to tighten it up a little bit. But I think the concept is something needed in the town, and I think the town meeting as a whole will approve of it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions from the audience?
Bill Bates, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 4. First, I want to always thank the planning board for your efforts. People don't realize how much work goes into stuff like this. And for you folks to volunteer and to do what you do is so much appreciated and needed. It's important work. And I would note that it doesn't eliminate you being a citizen. You don't give up any rights just because you're on the planning board or the board of selectmen and something that you might vote for might benefit you. So what? It's a community. We're in this together. We're supposed to be doing what's best for the town. And for anybody to indicate that it's a mistake.
Mr. Bates, please, let's not cross the line here.
Okay, you got it. I'd like to talk about sustainability. Folks, we can't keep going the way we're going. My property taxes in this town are now over $7,000 for my house. That's the first $7,000 I make goes to my property taxes. And what we've done, there's a group I want you to read about. It's called strongtowns.org. Please look into what these folks are doing. They're going across the country and, in fact, into Canada and explaining to people that what we're doing today is unsustainable when it comes to zoning and what we restrict people from doing with their properties. So from a sustainability standpoint, we have to come up with new ways to progress, to make money. There's nothing wrong with making money. We need a good business section downtown so that they don't have to keep increasing my property taxes. I support it as a town meeting member, and it took me 2 or 3 tries to help pass it. But the meals tax to come to Danvers, now it's up over $800,000 a year that we get from that meals tax. We got 0 before. But you have to do those things if you're gonna continue to have a great town. There was comments about driving through downtown. Big deal. Don't drive through. We don't want you to drive through. Go on 62, go someplace else. Downtown should be what it's being presented here. Hey, have the shops on the first floor, and I do have a question, Mr. Chairman, if you could clarify for me why the gentleman said that it is critical to maintain retail and commercial on the first floor. If at some point that could be answered, I'd appreciate it.
As opposed to multiple floors?
Well, I'm just curious as to the first floor.
Okay.
The apartments could be upstairs, they said, and commercial use could be upstairs, but on the first floor, he says it's
opposed to
critical that we maintain retail or commercial.
It's to increase the walkability of the downtown, and having residents on the first floor where people walking by would be able to glance into someone's home or apartment is something that we really aren't looking for in this town. So you move them up to the second, third floor, and that would keep it away from the eye level. Whereas the eye level for any commercial zone, regardless of whatever it is, would bring in people to actually look and maybe walk into that particular service. And Ted, please.
I would just say that, the core existing retail and restaurant areas is right on Maple Street between, say, Hobart and Connet. That's pretty much your concentrated. It's always been where your clustered your retail and your restaurants, and you don't want to lose that. That's the best place for it to be. That's the best opportunity in the future. So you want to solidify that. You want to enhance that. Whereas, if it's up above that, that just supports the businesses down below. And if it's on several of those side streets, that doesn't really matter much because you don't have those established clusters of retail and restaurant there. So that can be a mix of working along the street of residential and commercial. But it's really important in just that 2-3 block area to concentrate what already exists today and trying to make it better.
I picked out the word critical, and I just want to make sure that I understood why you were
And there's a lot of
saying
towns
it's so
that are doing
important.
that on segments of their downtown, not the whole downtown. That would be a huge mistake. But just segments where there's already, there's always has been a concentration of retail restaurants.
And not to belabor, I don't want to, stoplights and pedestrian stopping, like I said, I think that's good for the downtown. I think it's good for downtown businesses. To have somebody just driving through and going to Beverly doesn't help the town of Danvers. We don't get any money for that. We don't get any meals tax. It doesn't support our businesses. They just drive through. So to have lights and pedestrians, I think it's a good thing. I'm not sold on this. And somebody mentioned steamrolled. I don't feel steamrolled. I've been a town meeting member for almost 25 years. Nothing gets steamrolled. Well, there are plenty of meetings and plenty of time to discuss what's going on. But it could be, I think it's important that we figure out the traffic, it's here. We're not gonna do anything about traffic like the folks said. It's here, let's make the best of it. Let's make it walkable down there. I'm not saying it's a panacea, and when you mention Maple Street, people are concerned because we passed that a couple of years ago and nothing's really happening. That's okay. That means that the townspeople are looking at it and saying, okay, there are some changes, there's some options. It doesn't have to happen immediately. We wouldn't want it to happen immediately. You want it to just grow exponentially and have a chance to people to feel out the zoning. I have some questions over, and I'll talk with Mr. Nicholson about overlay versus changing the zoning completely. I've always been, as a novice, overlay because I want to protect the people's rights that they currently have. And I don't want them to lose that, so I'm gonna have to have some education on that. And I think,
Hearing those discussions.
again, thank you for your service. And let's do this together. I respect everybody. I'm glad that there's a little bit of pushback on the board. I think it'll be good. But I think this is something that is important for the town to look at. And guess what? It's not just downtown. After that, we got to look at other zones too. Thank you.
Before I proceed to another person in the audience, you are going to get your chance. I do want this audience to know, also at home, that the planning board doesn't make its decisions according to taxes, okay? We make our decisions according to what's good for the town in terms of zoning. Any of the tax base that either improves or doesn't improve accordingly has nothing to do with how our decisions are made. Obviously, we're not going to try and make a decision that's going to be against the town overall, but taxes and money that comes to this town is not what our basis of our decisions are, okay? You are welcome to discuss it, but we're not using that in our final decision-making on that. I saw a hand up over here a second ago. Did you, no? No? Ms. King? You'll be next. Ms. King, I saw your hand.
I'm Carla King. I am a town meeting member. I'm on the Danvers Affordable Housing Trust and also a commissioner for the Housing Authority. I live just off of one side of this area, and unfortunately, Bill, I don't have a choice. I have to drive through town. So I do have to say I'm very concerned about the traffic. I like a lot of the ideas. I'm very open to it, but driving through town can be awful, especially in the morning. It's sometimes taken me to get from the old Lions ambulance to Walgreens more than 20 minutes. I think that's even sometimes 25 minutes. Not often, but it happens. So I am very concerned about the traffic. I wanted to address Mr. Nathaniel Sayers' comment regarding low income. It was addressed that it's affordable, not low income. But I am that low income person. I don't have a quarry. I've since worked very hard to buy a two-family in town, which is nearly impossible. So I take offense to your comment about low income and bringing in criminal activity. Lastly, I am on the Affordable Housing Trust. And affordable housing in town, the way it's set up, is not affordable. So you don't have to worry about the lowlifes not being able to afford town, because at $1,800 for a two-bedroom apartment, to me, is not affordable in town. I could not afford to rent in town. I'm fortunate that I was able to buy the house that I bought when I bought it and able to have tenants that pay part of my mortgage. I could not afford the affordable rents in town. So I just wanted to clarify the affordable piece.
Let's try and keep this out of the personal range, please. Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matthew Duggan, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. Earlier in the board's discussion, you mentioned 40R, and you seemed to brush over that. Isn't that a key component of these overlays, the Chapter 40R?
No. It's a state-run program as to whether or not the town can benefit from a return of money, but it doesn't necessarily have a decision-making process on the zoning itself. Mr. Henry's going to have a presentation associated with that, and this is not the end of the discussion associated with it. It's not making our final decision in terms of the zoning itself.
Yeah, well, that's, my impression is that these overlays are part of the smart growth effort by the state to inject a lot more affordable housing into eastern Massachusetts. So 40R is a way for the town to relinquish local control. Governor Baker mentioned this recently, where he stated that the town has restrictions in terms of density and parking that directly impacts the ability to generate more affordable housing. And specifically for this corridor, Maple Street, High Street corridor, that goes right down the middle of Precinct 1. So that could have a detrimental impact on the quality of life in the residential neighborhoods that abut that corridor. So you're saying that 40R is not in play here?
I'm going to let Mr. Henry discuss that now, since it's a
So-
question.
Planning board, as Jim mentioned, has been undertaking a number of zoning changes over the years, and in 2017, that process, the town chose to pursue the 40R program. It does have some requirements. The work that we produced happened to qualify for the program, so the town applied and was accepted into the program and did receive a financial incentive payment for the adoption of the zoning for the Maple Street Traditional Neighborhood Development Overlay District, adopted by town meeting in December of 17. As we went and transitioned from that effort to this effort, we really didn't talk about 40R probably for the first year of that process. Because again, we're not doing this for that if it's there at the end, fantastic. But it was more important to the planning board and to the staff to pursue a plan, a vision that was right for downtown, was calibrated appropriately, that the community would support. And again, if at the end of that process it happened to qualify for 40R, that's great. If not, that's okay too. And I want to say it was, I believe, towards the end of July, the planning office, once we kind of felt like the zoning was coming together, this particular proposal was coming together, we did apply to DHCD to include these two districts, or, the downtown corridor, Live Work, and High Street, into the 40R program, simply to reserve our right, because that process takes so long to work through that if we decided tonight or in December that we wanted to do it, we would not be able to meet the requirements of the program and still hit our special town meeting deadline of February 10th. So we applied for the program back in July, and we'll talk more about the specifics of what's happening there, because we have had some feedback from the state on our application. But as the chairman said, it's never been about, well, let's change that so that we can stay qualified for 40R, or, I'm hearing this, but let's do this to get into the program. It's never been that way. It was simply something we wanted to reserve the town's right to participate in if it was right at the end of the day. And we'll touch more on that, I think, once we get through the
so
questions and answers.
Just one more comment on that 40R. So that money that the state reimburses the town, that's blood money. So that's money that comes from, specifically from sale of surplus state property. So that's a finite pool of cash. And 40R, it takes away a lot of the local zoning control in terms of density. It wipes out the table 2 about the number of dwelling units you can have per acre. It sometimes
Again-
doubles or triples it, at the same time reducing the number of parking spaces that are required, and it also impacts the abutters' ability to challenge any of the development. So that's just my interpretation of what.
40R has minimum density thresholds for certain development types. So single-family homes have to have you have to allow a certain number of those per acre. Multifamily, a certain amount per acre. Multifamily, a certain amount per acre. There's nothing in the 40R legislation that tells you how to park that. There's nothing in that legislation that says abutters lose appeal rights should a planning board issue a permit that they feel is erroneously granted. It is simply an incentive program that DHCD has put out there, that the Department of Housing and Community Development, that says if your zoning requirement meets these minimum density thresholds, you may be eligible for these financial payments. So I agree with you in the sense of it does have some standards, but it doesn't remove anything, it doesn't change any thresholds for granting those permits or that, but we'll
All
talk.
right, that's
we can
fine.
talk more
I'll
about
wait
that.
to see the actual warrant article before I make my final decision. Thank you.
Any further questions, comments? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Tony Betancourt, Precinct 5, Town Meeting Member. Why are we rushing this through? Why don't we look into the traffic and all that stuff and study all that stuff before we just go and rush this right through? Why are we doing that?
We have been studying the traffic.
No, I
and we
understand.
have- This particular process is a year and a half, and we've
We've had several traffic studies.
right, we've had multiple traffic studies. This all started,
Yeah, but what's it done? The traffic studies to tell us we got traffic. We know
we've
that.
done traffic studies, I
Well,
would say
there's-
probably
There's been
4.
change in the traffic, if you noticed, there's change in the traffic on Locust Street. You know, that intersection there with
No, I
Poplar.
understand that.
That was done. That was a byproduct of the traffic studies. I mean, Ted, do you have the dates of the traffic studies that were done?
Last one I'm aware of was 2017, that was a beta study, that was
Yeah.
a result of the first initiative on Maple Street,
Right.
what we can do with the traffic, how do we manage it in the future. So they basically prepared an analysis where they looked forward 20 or 30 years and projected how much traffic we would have then based on local and regional growth and development. And basically, based on that, based on the additional traffic we can expect over the next 20, 30 years, they have specific recommendations for improvements at the intersections, as well as traffic management measures that you could do, you know, as a policy matter. So there's a series of recommendations, specific recommendations in that traffic study about what the town can do to prepare for all the traffic. Whether or not, you know, that or this zoning proposal gets, you know, adopted, you know, those are things that need to be followed up now as part of, you know, the management of traffic downtown. Same with the parking. There was a parking study a couple years before that, with a series of very specific recommendations in terms of better utilizing the parking that we have.
And they also make recommendations in those studies about what we can do to change. I know that one of the changes that were made is right in front of the ambulance, that they did change the lights and they restriped in terms of giving right-hand turns, left-hand turns. I know that's minor, but you can't just do a wholesale change all of a sudden downtown. I was just informed that all those traffic studies that were done, they are available online too.
I believe it, but here's the point. We were talking about traffic back when we did the Water Street redistricting. So how long ago was that?
2000, let's see, no, 9.
See?
Yeah, I
You
think
haven't done
10,
anything.
2010.
I mean, that's,
The explosion was 2009.
yeah, there's been, yeah, but when
Was
you
it
do a traffic
2006?
study, you
I'm
don't do
sorry,
the whole town, you do
2006.
different
No,
sections.
I understand that. We had a problem back then already. You see what I'm getting at? So we just keep adding to it. And it would make sense if we kind of looked into the problem, looked at it gently, maybe try to do some tweaks here and there, take care of things, make it easier before we just throw all this into the mix. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
John Zavalia, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 4. About a year ago or two ago at Town Meeting, I think we voted on this, didn't we?
For a different section of town, yes.
But
A similar.
Is that the same one or no?
It's not exactly the same. This is a different part of town, but it was a similar type of overlay.
Okay, then the question I'm gonna have to ask is, at the meeting, at Town Meeting, it said in our info packets that there was some property that might have been a little shaky, and it was on file at the Department of Environmental Protection. And I asked at Town Meeting, how many properties we talking about? And I really didn't get an answer. So I guess my question now is this different? Are there any properties with either contaminated soil or square footage, or if I'm not asking the right question, I'm looking for properties that aren't clean that are gonna have to have some remediation work. Do we know of any right now?
I'm going to leave that one for staff in particular. I'm seeing a hand from a different staff. Is that for a question or?
I was just gonna say, the Board of Health has that information.
Okay.
Okay,
Such that it's been, I mean, there's properties that have had to file, but I mean, I don't know.
okay, then
There are properties that have never done, there's a 21E assessments. There are some properties that we're not privy to what's going on, and again, it's similar, I think, to a previous comment the chair made. Those are conditions on the property that property owners will have to deal with. Yeah, to move their properties forward if they choose to.
So my question is, what is the Board of Health flagged?
We,
I'm just going with,
In general, it cites that the DEP have flagged or have been flagged for having contaminants that are publicly known, that we know that you would know. So there's no advanced sites from what's been known to the state.
okay, so how many are we talking about? Properties or square footage?
That can be found through the DEP.
yeah.
Again,
Yeah, that's-
here we go again.
I guess what's the,
I gotta go through the DEP, and no one here in this room knows
Well, I
the
guess
answer to
I
that?
would like to answer your question
What's the
better, but
relevance?
yeah,
What's
what's
the
the,
relevance
what's the
of your
connection
question?
from that to
When you-
this?
Why relevant, you want the relevance? I'll give you the relevance. Is, what's gonna be the final cost? Are we taking over that cost? Everyone says, oh, the property owner. But a
Property
lot
owner
of
has to
times the
pay that
property owner
cost.
leaves, we're responsible, aren't we, if we're gonna have a project go forward?
Of course not.
This is not property owned by the town in any way, shape, or form.
Property doesn't
I
own
didn't
the
say it
property.
was, but if someone leaves,
If they
we're
leave, they still own the
responsible.
property.
I'm trying to find out how contaminated the soil is in any site, whether it's what I voted on a year and a half ago and never got an answer, or today.
I'm not sure how you didn't get an answer, because it was clearly depicted on the map how many pieces of property were affected. There was probably, in that small area that we rezoned, there might have been, I don't know, 30 buildings? It was pretty clear, the areas, the streets that we were talking about. The
Mr.
old fire
Sears.
station. No, let me finish. To come here and now say to the board, you didn't know what we were talking about, as a town meeting member, and as an outspoken town meeting member for several years, you had the opportunity to come to all of these meetings and workshops, and to now say that you don't know what we did
No.
is preposterous.
That's not where I'm coming from, and you know it. I said I
what
went to
you're
the
saying.
town meeting, I said at town meeting a year and a half ago, and in the info packet said that the properties in question were on file with the DEP, and I asked a simple question. What are we talking about? And I could not get an answer. You're the first one who has said 30 properties. I couldn't even, I can't,
don't have it in front of
what
me,
I'm
but
saying is,
I can picture it,
That's within the zone, we're not saying.
Within the
there's
zone.
30
correct,
properties.
but I ask a simple
30 properties
question.
that were rezoned, is what I'm saying.
I asked a
buildings.
simple question that Mr.
However
Sears
many.
just answered. 30.
I don't know
Maybe
the
there's
exact
less,
number.
maybe
That's
there's
my
more.
guess. I don't have it in front of you, but I'm saying,
think
if you're talking, the old fire station, you're talking Hot Watt, basically, it has 11 buildings, okay? Now, Hot Watt has probably asbestos and lead paint and all that good stuff. And anyone that's gonna reuse it has to clean it up so they can get finance to redevelop it. But that's their problem. That's not the town's problem. There's plenty of properties throughout this state that are dirty. The only way you're gonna redevelop those properties is to dig them up, clean them out, and then once they're clean, you can get financing from a guy like John, who works for Eastern Bank, and they'll finance that project. But I mean,
Let's not pick on other board members.
that's a daily, it's wide open tonight. That's a daily thing that's done all the time, that's development. It's the fact that a property, if there was a property that was dirty and was leaking oil onto your property or an abutting property, then that's obviously gonna be something that would be brought up. But the town doesn't enforce that. I mean, I'm not sure.
My quick question is, instead of saying to us that these properties are on file in my info pack, DEP, why don't you list them? That's all I'm coming from.
I'm not sure how that helps in the decision-making process.
It gives us more info, which we're not getting.
But that, you're asking the town.
I don't even know that we could know, to be honest. I mean, you're asking us to know a property that's hasn't done any soil disturbance for 40 years. The owner of that property has no reason to do a 21E assessment on the property. We have no reason to ask them for that assessment. So again, I don't know that we can give you the answer. We can simply, all we could tell you or help you, point you to the right direction is the agency that if a property has something that's been reportable and is on file with DEP, we may be able to point you in the right direction. But as Jim said, there's countless properties in this proposal. They have no obligation, or very, very rarely an obligation, to tell the town what's on the site and what they've been flagged with. And again, I would say offline, if you wanna come by the office and we can try to work through this with you, absolutely, help you find you the public information that you're looking for. But I don't think we, again, I'll just pick on Mr. Contos' site, because he just walked out of the room, so I'll pick on him. I don't know when the last time they dug in the dirt out there and if he had to report anything. So I couldn't, maybe there is contaminated there, but I couldn't tell you that because I don't know.
Well, if there was, he would have to.
You would have.
And he'll
Well,
have
yeah,
to clean
clean
it
it up.
up,
Yeah.
right. And that's a process that really has nothing to do with zoning, and the local board of health is only informed when certain things are triggered. So again, but we're happy to, again, it's information that the public might want to know more about, and we want to help you understand that, and if that's relevant, if we think that might be relevant for town meetings' decision-making process on this, we absolutely want to get that right. But again, I don't know that we're going to be able to tell you at the end of the day, we're rezoning 100 properties and 5 of them have these contaminants on them.
Well, one thing that may help is that whether or not this passes, the zoning and any sale of property is gonna require that site to be cleaned up, whether this passes or doesn't pass. And that's true for anybody who sells any property, and if you happen to have land that used to be, as we all do, farmland from 400 years ago, who knows what's buried in the ground and might be considered an issue now that wasn't back then. We're all going, those are situations that every site, whether it's personal or whether it's public or, well, not public, but whether it's a commercial or private homeowner, they all get looked for at that, whether it's this zone or any other zone.
Just to answer one more thing that has nothing to do with this. Mr. Sears, I work 11:30 to 8 at Endicott College. That's why you haven't seen me the last few years. Plus, I've had a couple of health issues. So I'd love to come to these meetings all the time. The only reason I'm here this week is Endicott's on vacation.
Mr. Bedcoin, hold on one second. I just, before we bring other people up, does anyone have any new comments? Anyone else who hasn't spoken that would like a chance? Go ahead, Mr. Bedcoin.
Tony Betancourt, Precinct 5. Just want to bring up a point. If I'm not mistaken, if the land is not commercial, you don't have to do a 21E. If it's a single-family lot, you just sell it. You don't have to do a 21E on it. So if you change the zoning now and you have a single-family house, now you check it, then you're in trouble. That's what it comes down to.
Not if it's single family to single family, but
If you change the zoning, like you're doing now,
it's the use. So if you have a single family home today and
Right.
tomorrow you decide whether.
well, you change the zoning, you make it commercial right now.
It's
Is that what
already
you're doing?
commercial. It's all commercial. Well, the only thing we're changing is to allow residential. So if you have residential now, it's still residential. The only difference is if you had, you were changing it, say you said, okay, for some reason, if I'm in C1 now, or I'm in I1, and I'm a residential use, and I want to take advantage of the fact that this is commercially zoned, so I'm going to take my first floor and make it a convenience store, okay? And now, if I have to go to Eastern Bank and get financing, they're going to say, you got to do a 21E because we want to make sure your site's clean.
Right, if it's commercial.
Right.
If it's
That's not what we're doing.
That's the property owner
We're-
choosing to change its use.
We're allowing an additional use
So-
for zones that don't have residential use now.
So, other words, if I own a house in this zoning, and you
Single-
change it, I still stay the same way I was?
Doesn't change it.
I don't have to go to commercial?
No.
And I guess that's an important
change
point,
it.
and we should say that's an important point, and I
Very
apologize that we've glossed over that. This, if you may continue to do whatever, if you're a property owner in the room, you don't have to do this. Zoning is, what I like to say, is like the ultimate public-private partnership. The community tells the property owners, we'd like you to develop your properties, if you choose to, in this direction. You're under no obligation to pursue that vision with us. If you're happy doing what you're doing, you have those rights in perpetuity. And in this town, with the authority that the Zoning Board of Appeals has, in some ways, that's a very good position to be in. Being a pre-existing nonconformity in this town is not a bad thing. But that said, so again, it's on the property owner's decision to change from one use to another. And if you choose to exercise commercial rights that we're giving you, or introduce residential into your commercial property that requires a redevelopment of some sort where you're gonna be introducing soil disturbance, then again, as a private party, you may have third-party lenders tell you, you need to do this, this, and this, but it's not us making
No,
those.
I understand that, but I'm talking about the benefits. That's what I'm trying to get at. Do you know what I'm saying? What you're saying, it doesn't make a difference, so that's fine.
I think the benefits are that we're giving, for the most part, wildly, it's more options for property owners, but we're not foreclosing from you doing what you're doing today.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Linda Flaherty, Precinct 6. Everybody, will you take a breath and lighten up? Wow, guys. Really? Tell you what, this is the planning board. If you guys want to plan for the past or plan for the status quo, how about y'all just go home? We're planning for the future. I'm loving what you guys do, and I give you all the credit in the world. The future's going to be made up of people like Margaret and me, and they're going to be made up of guys like Charles and my son. And if we're going to plan for the future, how about we look at the opportunity that's before us? Because in a world that is so divided, the word divisiveness enters your consciousness at least once a day, doesn't it? In a world of divisiveness, we finally found the one thing that the millennials and the baby boomers have in common, and that's the way we want to live. And so we need to start looking at the trend lines, and we need to start looking at what it is people my age group and my son's age group are looking at. And it's not the isolated big box on a quarter of acre where you have to drive everywhere. Margaret and I and our friends are all at an age group where we're looking to the future. And as our spouses and we retire, we're going from 2 cars down to 1. We're looking at our kids who are driving later, who find out that, you know what, owning a car isn't the big goal in life, like it was in my day. They Uber, they Lyft, they find alternatives, because owning a car, insuring it, paying for it, and driving it everywhere doesn't fit all of their lifestyles. And you know what? It's not fitting ours either. So they don't want our big box house. They want to be close to town. We've scared the living daylights out of them about driving drunk. So yeah, they do want to go down to the restaurant and have a couple glasses of wine and not worry about getting in the car. We did a good job, folks. We did a good job. They want the same things. They don't want the big spaces. They want to be where they're close to their work. They want to be close to where things are happening. They will keep those downtown communities vibrant. We got to find a way to make it happen. It's not what we want. We're differing on how we get there. You know what? The roof line downtown is going to change. It is. We're not going to be around to see it for some of us. And for those who are, they may welcome that change. We need to start looking at what it is we're doing that's positive, and I thank you guys for doing that, because I really do think you've taken that into consideration. But we need to look at where we need to be. And I think we all need to get on board and accept the fact that change is going to happen. Let's just do it right. Thank you.
Anyone else from the audience, please? Go right ahead.
This is all new to me. It's Chris Weeks. I'm over at 6 Park Street. Just a quick question in regards to the people who actually live in Danvers. I know you guys say you do a lot of studies and whatnot. Has there actually been any studies done of the people who live outside of town? Like, say, over on Center Street, of whether they're for this or against this? Because this is the first I'm hearing of it. I live right down 6 Park Street.
I'm gonna.
I mean, has there been any sort of survey done in the town? I mean, because I have 40, 50 friends who would be opposed to this. They obviously can't all fit in here to speak their minds. Has been any study done?
I do know that we send out a mass mailing, and we do keep it on the website for public for the entire town.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let Aaron see if he can answer your question a bit more thorough than I did.
Again, I'm concerned that you say at 6 Park Street you haven't received notice of any of these meetings, because I think we've did at least 3 mailings to the affected properties over the last 18 months, so I'm not sure why we...
I don't always receive the mail. My wife goes through it, so.
But that's not really my, that's not really my question. My question to you would be, is have you got a feel of the town? Because I can go out tomorrow and get 150, 200 no's to go against this. I mean, have you sent out?
Well, I guess, again, as,
Can you send out is there an email you go, yeah, survey, exactly. I mean, has that been done? You guys do, spending all this money on studies on traffic and this and that. What about the people who live here?
All these meetings are televised.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's in the newspaper. I
Okay, so
mean,
people work at night, some people don't even
sure.
know about it. I mean,
They can,
you can't
it's
fit-
on
this room fits 30
TV.
people.
You can go see it at different times. You can go to the town cable TV website and you can,
3 in the morning.
you can watch it anytime. You can watch the meetings. I mean, it's been extremely well
I don't know what you're
publicized.
doing at 3 in the morning, but that's weird.
If people are watching,
Every town meeting member who's ultimately the voting power is gonna be on the town meeting.
Right.
And every town meeting member has been informed of all these meetings. And I know that there's quite a few town meeting members on this board, and I know there's quite a few in the audience right now. And so every town meeting member is representing his own or her precinct that's out there. And they're the ones that are really the ones that are informed outside of the mailing within the certain purview of the town itself.
So
And
the answer would be no, you didn't get a feel like,
we haven't gone a specific survey associated with everybody in town, no.
okay.
We haven't
that's-
done that.
That's my question.
Okay. Go right ahead.
My name is Joanne Chain. I am a precinct member. This is my first year here, and I'm just beginning to get into the process of what's going on. I am on Fowler Street, just off your little zoning corridor and all of this. I'm also in the EPA zone. Now, at my age, I'm listening to a lot of things going on. The elderly are getting elderly in this town. It's going to go that way, and I can appreciate the younger people coming in. My property will go at 400, maybe 5, lucky. But I'm in the area where all of those houses, all local people, are in the same position. They're not young, they're not old, it's general. If I want to sell, there's no place in town that I can take and find a townhouse for an exchange, let alone make any kind of a profit. Traffic, big deal with me. Big deal with everybody in our area. You can't get through downtown. It's been said, you don't like it, go find another way around. Has anybody done a study on where else you can go in this town to get through? I don't think so. You can't get through Danvers. Everybody from Boston goes south, north, east, or west. So there's a lot of things, and I have not heard of a lot of this. I'm a new kid on the block, face is old, but I'm getting into it. So give it to me, whatever. Where do you think, you're committed. Most of the people in this town are not committed to getting into listening or going to television or pulling up on computer, all of those wonderful things that you're doing. So this is the first time for me, and it's quite a shocker. So I'm sorry, I have to agree with you, Nate, that a little bit more has to be looked at. Yes, I believe in the future. Yes, I believe in my kids. Yes, I believe it needs to change. But you know what? Not at the expense of a lot of people who are out there in the periphery. That's it for now, but you will hear from me again. Thank you.
Welcome. Glad to see that you're involved now. Every new face is good. Young or old, every new face is great. Anyone else have any questions, comments from the audience? No? Okay. So I'm going to bring it back to the board. Again, this does not preclude the end of comments or meetings. There will be plenty for anyone in the audience who is listening at home that wants to attend. If we need a larger venue, we will get a larger venue. We encourage all town meeting members or any town people to attend and have any questions or comments. You can also address us through, I'm going to throw it on the broad shoulders of Mr. Henry over here and his staff. They are available at any time, whether it's during our meetings or outside of it, to answer some specific questions if you don't feel comfortable with a microphone in front of you. But I'm going to turn it over, before I bring it to the board and we proceed, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Henry. He has some information for us about what the state has said about the 40R.
So we can leave this for people, maybe at the.
Yeah, we have more.
dates.
We also have an agenda for the future meetings available for anybody who needs them. They're available, I believe, on website also. And we're going to, I think if we don't have enough copies, we will try and get everybody out. If we have your name and address, we can make sure you get one. Mr. Henry.
Mr. Sears was just asking that this meeting tonight, we did expressly send notice to all town meeting members of. So just want to make sure, again, as the residents' representatives, we felt that it was, we're starting that process of bringing town meeting members in. To switch gears to the 40R, and again, I guess I would, for those who want to get into wonkish zoning terminology, we're about to go over the waterfall. So, as I mentioned before, late summer, we applied to the state for 40R. We were accepted into the program. The caveat there is that for a number of reasons, the principal one driven by a change in regulations since town meeting adopted the 40R at Maple Street, was we were informed that we are very unlikely to receive any financial compensation for this additional zoning. Given the paperwork that given the paperwork and the annual reporting, and as some have alluded to, some of the feelings about the 40R program and what it imposes on the municipality, it's our recommendation that the town not pursue 40R for this, and that we've been preparing this kind of in two lanes in case this ended up being necessary to do. It's our recommendation that we proceed with these changes as a base change to I-1, converting it into High Street mixed-use development zone, and replacing the C1 and C1A with downtown core and live work as described here tonight. I think that frees us up a little bit from some of, if the board chooses to further tinker with some of the development standards, we're no longer beholden to those minimum thresholds. Again, we've arrived at those numbers organically, so it may not change anything material in the proposal itself. Where it does clarify things a little bit from staff's perspective is that overlay versus base, 40R requires it to be an overlay. So we really would have had to struggle with how we want to reconcile industrial 1 remaining out there, C1, C1A remaining out there when they have uses and dimensional standards associated with those zoning districts that have not gotten any support throughout the process, regardless of that take. I'll go to the hypothetical again. I'm going to the max just to prove the point. Industrial 1 district on High Street allows 55 feet by right. It allows some fairly noxious uses that I don't think anybody, regardless of how you feel about this proposal, wants to see happen. Things like self-storage, warehousing, fuel storage. There are some uses that I'm not sure that we want to see happen going forward. And I'm also concerned that should somebody in the district utilize those rights, that, well, this guy next to me just built a 55-foot high self-storage facility. Maybe my apartment my plans to do a mixed-use building aren't as advantageous as they once were, and therefore, all of this work that we've been doing is that much, harder to realize because we still have property owners out there making choices under the existing zoning. So it's our recommendation that we move forward with exactly everything we've discussed, but we would just, on the drafting side, make the changes necessary to remove that from an overlay and just go base. As I said in the memo, we've been preparing for both, so again, we've advertised it as broad as possible, so it really doesn't affect the process. It just, I think we're at a point where to put this thing, the next step, we want to get this resolved so that we know what we need to do as we bring home the final version of the zoning. So,
One question I have before I throw it out to the board to discuss that. Are we talking about recommendation from staff for both the High Street and the downtown
Yes.
to be a zoning change as opposed to an overlay?
yes.
Okay. I'm going to throw it out to the board. I do want to make one comment. I'm personally more in favor of an overlay. I think I would have to be, me personally, I would have to be more convinced that we're not, that anything that we change from the existing zoning would benefit the current owners and not reduce their property values. That's one thing that I'm adamant about.
Yep.
I know that there are some other board members that are concerned about present zoning and some of the heights and some of the uses, which I understand, but I personally am more in favor of an overlay with incentivized ways of having them change to improve on it.
So I would say, at now said, I share that concern. By introducing the ability to bring residential into these properties, we're not going to be hurting people's, I would not expect that to be an outcome that we have to worry about, because residential is gonna drive all of these changes, in my opinion. I mean, that's what the market wants to do. And by introducing that, we probably change the calculus for property owners. That said, I did go through the book today just to familiarize myself with what's permitted in these districts and versus what we're proposing. And again, for the most part, the only things that property owners, and it affects the I-1 property owners more than it affects the C1 and the C1A owners, is the loss of the height that, again, in this proposal, we've brought down. So you do lose a floor and about 10 feet in I-1, and you don't get the dimensional protections that we have in the zoning district. But the uses itself that you would lose, it'd be like, again, I can give you the detailed information subsequent to this, but I mean, it's fuel storage, self-storage, assembly. So there are some industrial uses that exist in the district today that would become pre-existing nonconformity. But I'd also say if you go through the district today, those uses are clearly on the wane, and I don't think are contributing to the vision that the process has brought forward. So again, I think all things on balance, this benefits the property owners long-term.
I guess I would probably.
I'm not
yeah,
gonna
no.
try to sway your,
I think I would probably make the one proviso that I know that in previous overlays, what we've done is we've also changed the underlying, some of the underlying uses of those zones that are either obsolete or egregious in terms of its use within that downtown district or in the zone that it's in. I know that some of the changes that we made, we got rid of, we didn't change the heights, but we did change in Industrial 1, we got rid of some uses, even though we made it an overlay district on top of that.
I don't think we made any changes to Maple Street I-1. We simply did an overlay, and then in Danvers Port, we created a new
We had new districts.
That was a whole new.
We created
yeah.
the waterfront industrial, and we
Correct.
took away the height, and we took away some of the uses that the residents were most concerned about in the I-1 area.
But that was a total
But that
zone
was a
change. That
change,
wasn't.
yeah.
That
No,
wasn't,
right, we
yeah.
changed the,
But
yeah,
I didn't
I'm sorry,
think we
yeah.
could change, and I think we had a long discussion about overlay versus changing base zoning when we were doing Maple Street. Because if we changed the I-1 underlying zone, in that area, that would affect every other I-1 that we had. So we weren't just
Right, we would've
specifically
had to-
changed that one.
Correct.
So I didn't think we touched
That's why
anything
in
to
the
do.
port, we did the waterfront
Yes, but-
industrial was because we
right.
couldn't just change I-1 unilateral, or we could have, but it would have been a
Yeah,
town-wide
yeah.
change.
I also don't want to pit the current owners against town members, which I think may have occurred to an extent in, I think it was the waterfront when we changed over. I got the feeling that there was a bit of debate between one side versus the other, of people feeling that they were losing out on some benefits of their current ownership of the property versus other people who were, they were so encouraged by the change that they weren't concerned about those losses. I just don't want to see something like that happen in town again. So I'm open to both. Right now, I think I'm siding a bit more towards the overlay. But I've had this microphone long enough. I'm going to let John speak on this, and if you have any questions.
No, I mean, I'm open to it too, and I'd like to get the feedback from the community, because there's some issues that you raised, Aaron, tonight that I didn't really was as sensitive to some of the uses. So overlay has worked historically, at least from where I sit, but I'm definitely open to hear the debate. Maybe I got to get a seat with Bill Nicholson and. So I'd like to get more feedback on that.
I believe it'll start with his views on non-conforming.
Okay. But, I mean, when do we have to make that decision on this piece? I mean,
Soon.
okay.
That's not something that we're making a final decision tonight on. It's something, that's something before we bring the warrant article forward, I believe.
So that you get 2 weeks.
Well, so essentially, we're gonna fold in C1, C1A, into this zoning requirements and design standards that Ted has already done.
Correct.
So we just need to see, compare and contrast.
Right.
So you're basically gonna have a piece
Yeah.
of cellophane over it and say, here's what we're adding. And
I-
if we
and
are
I'll
gonna
do- I'll-
delete,
I
if
can
we
do
are gonna
that.
delete some of those uses, because they are obsolete, then we can highlight that. But I don't imagine we're gonna delete much in the way of any uses unless it was something.
And what comes down to the table of use, sort of point out the ones that may or may not be conflicting with the overall,
Yeah.
Initiative here.
It was 5 or
As far as
6.
the dimensional standards, those are attached to each individual building type, part of the design standards for buildings. So that sort of takes care of itself. But it really comes down to the use table and sort of figuring out, what we want to see in these 3 different districts and what's there in the underlying zoning today. And what things like self-storage may not belong there in the future.
So we'll get a summary? Is that the next
Yeah,
step?
I can work with Ted, and we can, I went through it today, and it was not as bad. I mean, it's, to Bill's concern, that was my thought, was I just wanted to reacquaint myself, and it's,
maybe just a handful. of
yeah,
things
it's
you
not
did,
ridiculous.
but actually you put aside and say, do you want those to be in there or not? And then you're adding other things like residential and mixed use.
The flip side of that is too, is the other thing is we could do that and bring those uses into the new zoning district, so that in theory, you're not losing
Right.
those opportunities at all, but it's just all into the new zoning.
I'd like to give Charles a chance.
Yep.
I don't actually have anything to add.
Okay, that's okay. Nathaniel, microphone's yours.
First time I've heard of a proposed swapping of an overlay with a complete zoning change, so it doesn't really impact my opinion on the whole thing, but if that's going to be done, if we're really in the final stretches of this entire thing, it's really last minute. And
Well-
I would want to hear from anybody in the town that might be impacted by it.
For the property owners who we have talked to throughout this, we've tried to be pretty clear about what's happening and the various options that we've been going through. So again, that's a concern of ours as well, so we've been trying to prepare on dual tracks to make sure that if we had to decide one way or the other, no one was deciding at the 11th hour that they've had the rug pulled out from under them.
And there are still plenty of time to change along the way. There's possibilities for change along the way still, so. We're not in the final stretches just yet. We're getting close to it. We're probably on the bell lap, but not on the final turn. I'll bring it over to this side. Peg?
Well, number one, Aaron, I would say since we did the waterfront district and the industrial district in Davisport, down in Davisport, I think the climate may have changed slightly of a them against us that we had in Danvers. I think people are more understanding about what we're trying to do. They know that if they have an industrial property, they're non-conforming, they are in the district, but they're non-conforming, and no one's gonna take that right again away from them. And if they wanna sell to somebody, they can sell to somebody that wants to go in for industrial because they're gonna remain non-conforming. When the study first was done a long, long time ago, when we started looking at all the industrial all 11 of them, part of the thought was, I don't remember a lot about overlay. It was either melding that portion of I-1 into the adjacent district or, putting in a new type of district. And I have never been a big fan of an overlay. I mean, I supported it because of the 40R, but I've never been a big fan of the overlay because there is an underlying, as you say, zoning that says that your next door neighbor could decide to put in a 55-foot storage building, and he can do it by right because it's in the industrial one, even though we've got an overlay going in saying we're trying to encourage mixed use. I think the economic climate is such that the residential, or what we're proposing in this type of zoning initiative, is probably more attractive than someone building a 55-foot storage container building. But, I would be interested in seeing what businesses would be taken out, be affected if we do zoning. And if we change the zone completely, I think the Danvers Port has worked very well. And the Danvers Industrial Park that we segmented has worked very well on the side. But then, again, depending upon the type of businesses that we might be able to delete. I think after we do High Street, the only ones I can think of is the one by Connor's Farm up there and the one on North Street and Route 1. So we only have 2 more I-1s that we haven't addressed, thankfully. And I think both of those we had decided work fairly well, and it wasn't something that we were going to delve into.
Changes might be minimal. If we
Yeah,
do it.
right away. So we're also at a point where if we wanted to go in and delete some changes, do an overlay and delete some changes from the industrial one, it might be something that was more doable than when we were doing the Water Street area or Tapleyville or our 40R on Maple Street. So to answer your question, I don't know. Put together your list.
Okay.
I'll look at it.
I think to be fair, I'd also put in that list the uses that aren't affected by that change.
Yes.
Because again, I went through and it's the retail that we see on High Street and C1, everything that's there is allowed in both. So I think to be fair, it's generally just about 5 or 6 that would probably need a judgment call. But I'll put that list together, it's very easily done.
Just to clarify my point, I just want to make sure that it's not just the industrial or commercial uses. We're looking out for the
business owner.
Right, but the present owners of both homeowners and also commercial and industrial. I just don't want to see
Which we
anyone
always
who.
try to do.
Right, of course we do. But I
Balancing
just
that.
I don't want to make changes that feel like any of those homeowners, because they bought them with the specific idea of what zone they were buying into at the time. And we just don't want to, I don't want to feel like we're pulling any of their rights that they purchased for away from them.
I agree.
That's all. That's
I
all.
agree.
So I think a thorough look is more important at this point in time. And we may end up doing the zone and change as opposed to an overlay, and I might agree with it after we see all the numbers and how we go with it. But right now, I'm tending towards the overlay a bit more. Jim?
I've already commented.
Oh,
So,
okay.
But
see what
Peg,
happens.
just to help you out, I mean, where the residential is, where most of the private capital's been going, the second product type
Yeah.
is self-storage.
Is it really? Oh, dear.
I would, and again, that's my fears, and to
It
your
is.
point,
Oh, dear.
we get these economic development things. I didn't realize there's a whole subset of commercial market right now in the Northeast for self-storage. And if we think about our permitting history, we just doubled the size of the self-storage facility on Pope's Lane. The U-Haul on Route 1 was a couple years before that, when they added that second floor to that facility. And again, I didn't really
Well,
I've not really dived into it
Well,
until
they're
I did. And then,
downsizing this, they're not getting rid of their
right,
stuff.
they're just putting it
right?
in
That's
storage.
right, they're going to storage.
Yeah.
I'm not against self-storage, I just don't think the
just-
facilities we're talking about
No,
are.
but I just,
No,
people need to
agreed.
know that's the, it,
I think as the
No,
gateway
that's surprising,
in,
yeah, yeah,
it's not probably something we want
Exactly.
on High Street as you enter downtown.
okay. So unless, go ahead.
So the threat of the chocolate box isn't a threat anymore?
I prefer we didn't call it that. So unless there's any other comments from the board,
Provide you those lists.
yes. We are charged at this point in time with sending a letter to the Board of Selectmen just to notify them for an agenda item that we're coming forward with a warrant article. This does not mean that the warrant article is moving forward from this stage. It's simply to alert the chairman of the Board of Selectmen and that we're going on to their agenda items. I'm just going to read it briefly. Dear Chairman Bennett, on November 26, 2019, the Planning Board voted to initiate the proposed downtown corridor zoning bylaw and zoning map amendment article for submission to the Board of Selectmen in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 40A. An executive summary of the proposed zoning amendment is attached. Representatives of the Planning Board and the Land Use Department look forward to attending your meeting of December 3rd, 2019, to present the proposed amendment and respond to any questions you may have. I want to reiterate that this is not the actual warrant article. It is still in its stages of change. It is just so that it gets, on a timeline standpoint, into the system. And it's going to be CC'd to the town manager, Steve Bartha, and town clerk, Joseph Collins. So unless there's any further discussion, I'm looking for a motion that we move forward and send that letter along.
so moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Me.
Then we're all set with that. At this time, I'm going to end this portion of the public meeting, and I'm going to give everybody who doesn't want to stay around for the briefing with staff and chair a moment to leave. You're more than welcome to stay. The meeting is not over, but I'm going to give everybody about a 5-minute break so everybody can gather themselves. Whoever wants to stick around is more than welcome for the riveting conversations we're going to have after that. Remember, this is not the end of it, okay? You're excused.
I know, we'll connect.
You got a 5-minute break?
What?
5-minute break, Mr. Chair?
5-minute break, yes.
5-minute break.
That I don't know.
We weren't rejected. We were, no, we were accepted, accepted into the program. Well,
Yeah, you know.
so,
Staff briefing. Before, I don't know if this is appropriate, but I'm going to start off with an email that I got just today. It's not that big of a deal. It's just from the town that they're looking for, there's a community workshop between December 5th. I'm sorry, not between, during December 5th, between 8:30 and 4:30. And they were asking if I could attend. I cannot attend. And I didn't know if anyone from the board would like to represent or have the available time, and it's a Thursday, and it's about, the workshop will follow the community resilience building guidance development developed by the Nature Conservancy which has been successfully used in over 100 communities. The workshops objectives are to identify natural hazards that present the greatest threat to the community, evaluate strengths and vulnerabilities of residents, infrastructure and natural resources, develop and prioritize action that reduces the impact of hazards and increase resilience. I don't know if you've seen any of this or heard about it. This was the first I saw it, it was only an hour before.
Yeah, I'm there as staff. So.
Okay, and that's, I didn't know if anyone else from the board would like to attend. I'm not gonna look at anyone in particular. I unfortunately am not able to. I'm sure Jim has all kinds of free time, and Nathaniel, with his business going, I'm sure he has all kinds of free time for that too. But I don't know if anyone from the board would like to volunteer.
I can't do it.
No, huh? Yeah.
I was gonna suggest, and I didn't get a copy of that one, it went to I think the board chairs. If you wanna maybe email that to board members, forward it to the rest of the board, just so
I
they
can.
can see the language, but
I made the assumption that everybody got it, I just didn't know if
I
we
think they
did.
were just reaching out to
Okay.
chairs.
Yeah.
Um,
I didn't want to, I haven't replied yet. They need a reply by Friday, which that was kind of surprising that I got it only 3 days before with a big holiday in between. But anyways, I'll forward it to anybody as soon as I can, either tonight or tomorrow morning. And if anybody can attend, please, you know, hopefully make our presence. I'm not gonna look specifically at you, Mark.
I'm having surgery the 6th.
I understand. That's fine. That's fine. I just didn't know if anyone had the time and they could.
I would love
But we'll
to,
have,
but I can't.
we have got staff, some members of the staff that'll be available there. But for anybody who can, they'll have that email forwarded to them. I'm gonna, unfortunately, have to reply that I can't make it. Okay? I'm gonna put it out to Aaron if there's anything for staff to continue with.
Yep, so one quick thing, Attorney McCann is sitting here, I'm sure she was just waiting all night for this. We have received the proper paperwork for the performance guarantee for Beaver Brook. They'd like not to have to wait to December 10th, and knowing the calendar, they're asking us for a special meeting to deal with that. It'd be ideally Thursday, December 5th, or Friday, December 6th during the day. We need 3 members if we want to make this accommodation. In order to have a quorum, we need 3. To act, we need 3. The only wrinkle on this one is I think, while there is a potential modification, so I think it's probably more like a 30-minute conversation about whether or not we want to relocate an easement that was being offered.
Before I open it up to the board to discuss, one of our members has to recuse himself.
We done?
We're done.
Have a good Thanksgiving.
You too.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Otherwise, if we can't make the accommodation, it'll have to slide to the 10th.
Okay. And what day are we talking about?
Thursday, December 5th, or Friday, December 6th. I know December 6th is not going to work.
No,
for
I
you
could,
guys.
what time did you say, the 5th? Would it be like 8 or
We
early?
can, I believe we can do anytime. So I'll say from 8 a.m. to, again, I don't want to say that evening,
I
but
can-
we can do whatever.
I can make time for either day. I know that the office on Fridays are, this building only goes till about 1. It has to be, for me,
I'm gonna tell Steve that we only go to 1.
I thought Fridays it was only
1:30.
1:30, okay, 1:30.
I'll tell, it's
Okay,
fine.
fine.
I'll go home at 1.
It's earlier than I get to
what's
stay,
up?
let's put it that way. They leave a lot earlier than me on Friday.
The 5th is a Thursday.
Yeah. The
I
5th is
apologize.
a Thursday, the 6th is
I
Friday.
just saw, okay, the 6th, I didn't see the date after, okay. So, I'll throw it out to the rest of the board in a second, but my available time is prior to 9. I have a 1 o'clock slot available in the middle of the day for either of those, and I know no one wants to come at night, but anytime after 5 on Thursday is available for me. Okay?
Mr. Chairman, we're also happy to take up 10 minutes of your time and have the discussion tonight, if that's easier as well. I did not know there was going to be a meeting tonight. The last time we met with the planning board, this meeting wasn't happening. So I had sent a request in through Aaron to have a special meeting. We're here now. If you all want to discuss this.
I'm
this
just
is
worried that
enforcement of the Mylar.
I'm just worried that we're going beyond staff update if we get into the material of it, but
Is there anything in particular that's, besides signing Mylars of present plans?
the easement issue is basically, right now, you have the town's right-of-way, the paper street in a certain location.
Right.
And the applicant is offering on the set of Mylar plans. And again, I really don't think we should get into this conversation here, because this is a substantive
Right,
matter that
okay.
we have not put on an agenda.
Okay.
But it's basically a proposed relocation of that, and the applicant is asking the planning board if, on the endorsement set of plans, can they show that relocation? So again, I think it's a bit more of a conversation than we can do tonight,
So,
but.
My opinion on this at this point in time is, if we're simply signing the present Mylars of what we approved, any changes that occur after that would have to require a site plan modification, correct?
Not necessarily. I think at the very minimum, though, I think what Nancy McCann would like to get out of the planning board when we endorse the set of Mylars that we're recommending we endorse is that her next step is to go to the Board of Selectmen to deal with the easement, because it's the selectmen technically that own the rights and that are the executor of those rights. But I think she'd like to bring to that meeting with the selectmen, the planning board's disposition of, yes, that's better, or no, that's, not our preference. So I think what we want the board to do is sign the set of plans that reflect the changes required by the decision, and give them some guidance as to where we stand on the modification. If that all goes through and there's some legalese that's happening with this, that may require them to come back and modify, but if it all works out, then it probably doesn't, but.
Okay. I'm gonna put it out to the board real quick. John?
The only time I can do it is Thursday night, the normal time. I'm in Boston all day, so we can't delegate. Can we delegate our votes? Is that allowed?
No. If that was the case, so you're not comfortable with voting on something like that tonight?
Well, I'm really
Because the conversation's gonna get a lot deeper if we do.
But
That's
I'd
why.
also would be careful that we have no
Published
materials
it.
in front of it. We didn't tell anybody we're talking
Yeah,
about Beaverbrook.
I make myself available that Thursday. Unless someone else can do it earlier.
I know I can be there, so if we have a minimum of 3. Unfortunately, this is not a special permit, this is a site plan.
It doesn't matter whether I'm available or not.
Unfortunately, yes.
Well, that's fine, because I'm not available. I teach at North Shore Community College on Thursday night.
You
at
are allowed to
6:30.
comment, though, if you would like.
My students are expecting me up there by the Ferncroft.
Charles?
I'm available anytime.
Any of those times? Yeah.
And
Peg, is there any?
I can't do an all-day affair like what you just had, but I can meet for a meeting on Thursday at any time.
Okay.
Is there any restrictions in terms of your personal commitment? Any of those times during that day for like a
It
half
sounds
hour?
to me
No,
like we're honing in.
my Thursday was just wide open, so
okay.
it sounds to me like this meeting would be, I just come down here, like we did for the last.
Yep,
no
and
problem.
again,
I just didn't want to tie up a whole day the day before.
Sounds like Thursday would be the better day
I
then
think
for everybody.
if we do Thursday morning, 8 AM to, I'll say 9,
Yeah,
8 to 9.
I'm good with that. I can do that.
Thursday, the 5th?
Well, okay, so if you do it in the morning, then if you got 3 people, then you got your quorum, right?
Correct.
Because I won't be able to do the morning.
Okay,
That's fine.
Okay.
all right, well, I'll confirm that,
Okay.
with you all.
Any time that day, because it's a short meeting.
I think we tentatively just said Thursday, 8 AM.
Thursday at 8 AM.
Yep.
And I don't think it will be,
Yeah,
if it goes an hour, I'd be surprised.
yeah, I myself wouldn't, yeah.
But I think it will be helpful to have.
Yeah, no, that's why, that's what I want to make sure that everyone,
I'm happy to do it tonight, but I understand.
yeah. Okay, thank you all. I'll send out
Okay.
a confirmatory email.
Then I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn?
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thanksgiving.
To you.
Have a lot of turkey.